hi, I'm Dr. K. I'm a Harvard-trained psychiatrist, and we're doing something a little bit different from interviews today. Viewers from our Discord and subreddit submitted problems that they're going through, and I'm going to try to help them out. And today's theme is about relationships. If you guys want to join in next time, join our Discord and post scenarios in the channel #AskDrK. There's also cool stuff on the Discord, like a meditation group, people supporting each other's mental health, and also, people are crushing it in League and other games. And for real, like, we offer a ton of workshops. This is all community driven, from everywhere from baking to coding. We have like a room cleaning group that meets once a week to kind of clean stuff up. So it's really a place for people to work on themselves and acquire new skills and support each other. So feel free to join our Discord and maybe submit some questions. Okay, so good afternoon, Dr. K. I'm a guy and I'm wondering how I can get better. How can I better understand and communicate my feelings of attraction to another close guy friend? He's been one of my best friends for just about 4 years now, and we've even spoken about mutual attraction. It always ends up feeling like we've just missed each other. I care for him deeply, but it's been confusing and painful as well. As vague as that all is, I would love to hear your thoughts on what attraction is, what different forms are there, about the shame that so often can come with being gay, and all that can entail with a close guy friend. Really good question. Okay, this is a little bit tricky. So let's start with this. So the first thing that I like about this question is that I think it's a very well-framed question. So as we start to think a little bit about, how do we approach problems? As we say a lot on stream, good diagnosis precedes good treatment. And so how do you find the right diagnosis? By asking the right question or ordering the right test, right? So let's take a step back and think about how should we approach challenges in our life. So the first thing we should do is understand our challenges. But even before we understand challenges, we have to understand how to understand challenges. And so in medicine, they teach us the art of diagnosis, which is all about asking the right questions or ordering the right tests. So what I really like about this question is actually this first part over here, which is I'm wondering how can I better understand and communicate my feelings of attraction. So the first thing you've got to do is better understand your feelings of attraction. Okay? So, and then before you communicate them, you've got to understand kind of where you are. And you don't have to understand everything fully, but in order to communicate effectively, you have to understand effectively. And so let's think a little bit about this. So I also like that this person has multiple shades of feeling, which is probably closer to the truth than one directional. So we see this a lot where people will say, I'm deeply, deeply in love with someone. And what they'll say is it's all one directional and it's very intense. And that oftentimes gets people into trouble when all they sort of recognize is one shade of color in terms of their internal environment. And so, it's interesting because it sounds like you care about him a lot. It sounds like, you care about him as a friend. Frankly, it sounds like you could be in love, dude. And so, I think it's important to just ask yourself that question, am I in love? Do you know what it's like to be in love? If not, this really could be it. And that it's confusing and painful as well. So I think it's really good that you sort of understand all those different parts about yourself. And so, and it sounds like you guys have kind of even gotten into the discussion a little bit, right? So it says we've spoken about mutual attraction, and it always ends up feeling like we've missed each other. So that, I think, is an important feeling. So I wonder if what's going on here is that the two of you actually are interested or do have some kind of romantic feelings for each other, but that neither of you feels comfortable enough to put yourself out on a limb and risk ruining the friendship to see if there's more to your relationship. And I could sort of imagine that, your friend could be feeling exactly the same way, which is that you guys are really, really good friends. Your friendship matters a lot to you, it matters a lot to him, that it sounds like you guys have sort of talked about being attracted to each other. And then neither of you has been willing to sort of like step into that vulnerable space and say like, hey, do you want to actually try something here? And so, I think the way to approach this is, first of all, to understand like, what do you really feel about him? Are you, because it's possible to be really good friends with someone and physically attracted to them, but like not have a romantic component, right? So like we see that in platonic relationships all the time, where like you may be attracted to, someone of the opposite sex, assuming you're heterosexual, and you guys could be really good friends, but like you guys wouldn't actually like be a good relationship, or there isn't actually a romantic feeling. And so that's possible. So I think the first thing to figure out is, just ask yourself, and it's like one of these gut checks, right? Like, am I secretly in love with this person and I'm just scared to admit it? And if the answer is yes, then I don't know that I would go about sharing that directly with the person. But I think probably the best way to approach this is to have a conversation and say, hey, I care about you a lot as a friend, and I find myself being attracted to you, and I feel like we keep on missing each other, and maybe there's a chance for a relationship, but I also value your friendship, and I kind of don't want to risk that. And then ask an open-ended question. What do you think about that? So this is something that we often teach our coaches, which is that like they'll come to me with a question and they'll say, I have a client who, it feels like I had a case the other day. So one of the coaches had a little bit of trouble with this, or was kind of talking it through. And they said that, I have a client who kind of came in and wanted to work on a goal, but, the goal is like something that's really painful for them. So I'm not really sure like how to talk about it, because anytime we sort of bring it up, like my client gets emotional and I'm not sure like what to do. So it seems like talking about it is hurtful to them, but at the same time, that's what they're here to work on. So these negative emotions come to the surface and I don't know what to do. And what I would tell that coach, or what I did tell that coach, is that's exactly what you should say to your client, right? Say, hey, like, I know you're here to work on this, but every time we kind of bring it up, like it seems painful for you, which is exactly why you want to work on it. But at the same time, I sort of feel like I don't know if I should push you or not, because it seems like it hurts and I don't want to say anything that's going to be like hurtful to you. And at the same time, we have to work on it. So kind of enroll them in your decision-making process, right? So like too much about what problems we run into in relationships is like when one person makes all the decisions, right? So what I mean by that is like a good example of this is like friend zoning, or girlfriend zoning, right? Where like one person all on their own builds up all these thoughts and feelings and hopes and dreams, and you're all like in your mind, you like create this whole world about who this other person is, and you fall in love with that person and all the wonderful, and it's like all in your head, and the other person doesn't have any like say so in what you create in your mind. It's not like a mutual relationship that you've created. And I know that sounds weird that we aren't all relationships mutual. No, right? Sometimes we create all these relationships in our head that are sort of like solo relationships, and you build up all these like ideas about who this person is. Like you meet this girl and she's nice to you and you're like, oh my God, she's the one. And so what I think you should do is like let your friend be a part of this process, right? So like tell him like, hey man, this is what's going on with me. I value your friendship. I feel like I'm attracted to you. We've kind of touched on it before, but like, I feel like we keep on missing each other. And I'm not sure if this is worth exploring or not. What do you think? Because the foundation of a successful relationship absolutely is communication, because it's like two people, right? So you've got to like work with them. And if you want it to work, I think a good way to start, like a good solid foundation for a relationship, is like the two of y'all sitting down and deciding, hey, do we want to try this or not? Is there something here or not? And recognize that you yourself are going to be afraid of rejection, right? And that you don't want to kind of notice that too. But it sounds like you guys have been close for a while, and y'all have been friends for 4 years. So, a little bit of rejection can hurt, but hopefully it won't, torpedo the relationship. That I've never really heard of, I've never heard of a relationship where one person sort of explores their feelings with the other person and the relationship just crumbles apart after 4 years. I've certainly heard about relationships where you catch feelings for someone and then you are deeply in love, and then like you guys used to be friends, but now you're deeply in love, and that sort of falls apart because you can't be friends with them anymore because of your feelings. But I don't know if we're here, if that's what this scenario is. So I'd say overall, the way to approach it is just to have a conversation where you basically say exactly what you said to me and what the way you posted your question, and then you explore it with your friend and you guys kind of figure it out together. As vague as that all is, I would love to hear your thoughts on what attraction is, what different forms are there, and about shame that so often comes with being gay and all that can entail with a close guy friend. Okay. Let's talk about what attraction is. I mean, I'm not an expert in this, but I'll toss out a couple of different ideas, right? So one is like physical attraction. And that's just like you're physically attracted to someone. Someone's, the way that they look or something about them like appeals to you sort of like on a physical and biological level. Then there's also, more of like emotional attraction. So as you get to know someone, and this happens a lot with men. So, as you start to express emotional intimacy, men are rarely taught to express emotional intimacy outside of like very close nuclear intimate relationships. So you may express emotional intimacy towards your parents, maybe your siblings, and then like the other place that you express emotional intimacy is with romantic partners. So sometimes what can happen is emotional intimacy can get confused as attraction. And what I mean by that is that like if you have a female friend and you guys are emotionally kind of intimate with each other, and we hear this a lot from, bitter dudes on the internet where they say like, I was there for all of her emotional needs and then she friend zoned me. And it's like, yeah, that's sort of true. But I think the confusing thing there is that like for a lot of women, and I'm just sort of using the kind of heteronormative average person here. So women are taught to be emotionally intimate outside of romantic relationships and men are not. So like what being emotionally intimate with a woman sort of entitles you to is not necessarily a romantic relationship, but you to be emotionally intimate with them without a romantic relationship, which can be really confusing for us because we're not taught how to like do that, right? It's kind of confusing for us. So, I think there's an emotional attraction which can grow into love, but oftentimes is confused with sort of emotional intimacy. And then, the third thing that I'll say, I know we don't really talk about this much because it's not very scientific, is I do think that there's like a spiritual attraction. So just my personal experience has been like, I fell deeply in love with, I didn't understand what it was, but I fell deeply in love with my wife, like literally the first time I saw her, and I didn't even understand what I was feeling. Like, I still remember the moment where I was like walking outside, and I was walking past a picnic bench and she was like walking the other way, and I just saw her and it felt like someone had slammed me in the chest. And it was just a weird fucking feeling, and like I didn't understand what the fuck happened. And then like I didn't even talk to her for 3 years. Like I didn't know who she was. It was just like I don't know what that was. That was weird. And so I do sort of like believe in this weird destiny kind of crap. Like I know it's not scientific. I know it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I know it's old fashioned, but my own experience has just been so altering that like I do believe in that. I mean, it's weird. But I do sort of, think that that's an important thing to acknowledge. Whether it's real or not, I don't really know. I still don't know, whether it's real. But I think that if we're trying to understand the lenses to view attraction through, it's important to acknowledge that some people do have experiences where they feel like their attraction to another person is like destiny or fate or like whatever, that they were like destined to be together and there's only one person in the world for them. And we see that in our stories, right? Like there are like all these hopeless romantics out there. And so there's something about the human condition where people interpret it that way. I'm not saying that it's like cosmically true. What I'm saying is that if you look at human behavior, that's something that you have to acknowledge, right? You have to acknowledge that people consistently have this experience and that this is like an archetype that runs through our stories and our history as human beings. So I think that there is that sort of spiritual kind of attraction. And then I'd also say that like this is where things get really confusing, because a lot of times what happens is we feel that emotional intimacy and we kind of confuse emotional intimacy for that faded love, right? And that gets really tricky because how do you understand what the difference is? And then the short answer there is that I think the more tranquil your mind, the more you'll be able to differentiate, is this some kind of attachment that I have that's out of proportion, or is this like actually like destiny that we're supposed to be together? And I think the more calm you are and the more detached you are, the better you're going to be at telling which one is which. And then the last thing, which I just want to touch on because it's like sort of a neuroscience take on it, is I just want to talk to you guys a little bit about oxytocin, because I think this is an important part of attraction. So oxytocin is a hormone that sort of deals with emotional bonding. So for example, there are a lot of hormones that lead to milk production for new mothers. And then oxytocin is the hormone that facilitates something called milk letdown. And what that means is that when a child is ready to feed, there's actually milk in the breast. And then like there's like a release valve when a child nurses that causes the milk to kind of like go, leave the breast, right? So to be consumed by the child. And so that hormone is actually oxytocin. So oxytocin governs milk letdown. And along with that comes a lot of emotional bonding. So oxytocin, I know that this is a terrible thing to bring up, but it's like, come on, chat, just run with me. Like, stay with me for a minute, okay? Like, let's not make boob jokes, okay? So oxytocin is also like the hugging hormone. So oxytocin is a hormone that facilitates emotional bonding and comes from things like cuddling. So oxytocin also improves our mood and like improves like emotional relationships. There are actually some trials which have tried to test intranasal oxytocin for people with schizophrenia to see if they can like form better social interactions. Turns out that the trials really didn't show a whole lot of benefit. But the idea is that, sometimes people with schizophrenia have trouble forming like social relationships. And so some people hypothesize that it's like kind of an oxytocin deficiency. So if we supplement oxytocin, will they be able to form relationships? Turns out clinically, it doesn't seem to help much. But the theory is sort of there. And we know that oxytocin is sort of related to emotional bonding. And I don't know if you guys like cuddle with stuff, right? So I know there's going to be a lot of, Pepe hands here. But even like a cat or a dog or like kids, like, so I have kids and I enjoy like cuddling with my kids. And what happens is like when you do that, like literally you get, oxytocin being released. Like when you hold your child and you rock them to sleep and stuff like that, you get oxytocin release. And oxytocin forms emotional bonds with like other human beings. So whenever you get an oxytocin spurt, whoever is around you, you're going to feel like emotionally bonded to. And the reason I think this is important is because nowadays we have a lot of like fluid relationships that are forming. And I think I have yet to really see an open relationship that I would say is like very successful and lasts for a long time. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with open relationships. It's just, I've worked with a lot of people who have been in them. And I think something that happens when you start having like friends with benefits and stuff like that is that a lot of times things will get muddy. Like it's a really hard tightrope to walk. And I think part of the reason for that is that, when you engage in sexual activity with someone, your brain is going to be like, hey, like, let's bond with this person. Like this person, I'm going to start caring about them. So it's almost like a hormone mediated like boost in how emotionally invested you are in someone. And so, I think that there's also like a component of let's forget about physical attraction, let's forget about emotional attraction or spiritual attraction. And let's just acknowledge that if you have, a sexual relationship with someone, or now I also hear that there are people who are professional cuddlers, that you're probably going to start to form emotional bonds with these people, even if you sort of don't want to. And on the flip side, if that's oftentimes what happens, is even if you don't form the emotional bond, maybe the person that you're physically, like, sexually engaged with could start forming bonds with you. And that's just, it's sort of neuroscience. It's kind of how we're wired. We're wired to be emotionally invested in the people that we have sex with. And the last thing is, so talking about the shame about that so often comes with being gay. And I mean, I don't mean to be insensitive, but like, I don't really understand that, right? Because like my experience as a heterosexual male was that like, I don't really understand what it's like to have, I've worked with a lot of gay people. I've worked with a lot of transgender people. I've helped them sort of find their sexual identity and sort of like, I've helped them through that process. But I got to be honest with you, it's one of the things that I understand the least. Like I don't, I feel like I have a good understanding of a lot of stuff, but when it comes to sexual identity, like I've got a rubric that I sort of help people work through. So I've sort of figured out, like, from almost like a stimulus response kind of way, like from like a testing hypothesis way, how to help those people through those journey. And I feel confident in being able to do it. But I also want to acknowledge that I actually don't know what it's like emotionally, to have a sexuality or identity that is, generally speaking, faces a lot of judgment and a lack of acceptance and confusion by society. And this is where I'd say that, and I'm sorry to say, I just, this is not something that I understand. I wish I did. I really do. But I feel like I would be doing you a disservice if I wasn't honest about saying I don't know what it's like to be gay. I don't know. Like I said, I've helped people through it, but I still don't really know what their experience is like. It's sort of like I've helped deliver babies, but I don't know what it's like to be pregnant. I don't know what it's like to go through childbirth. Like, I just don't know. And what I would say is that, like, if you do have shame with being gay and stuff, like, try to find communities. We're actually thinking about starting, topic specific groups and at Healthy Gamer. And one of them may be sort of around navigating gender identity and sexuality. So, we'll keep you guys posted about that. But I think like it's really helpful to be with other people who are going through your journey. You don't necessarily need to have answers from someone who's gone through it and knows everything. It can be enough to be with other people who are just as confused as you are, and you guys kind of like work through it together, which is really what we've seen in group coaching. Okay. Dear Dr. K, my name is Amelia, and I'm a 23-year-old introvert who has never had a boyfriend, girlfriend, and probably never will at this rate. I feel so stuck in this constant loop of feeling like I'll never find love or even experience it. I look around me at my friends or even siblings, and they have never suffered from this problem. Is there something wrong with me? Is there something I didn't learn or miss out on? Why am I so out of the loop? Everyone around me is either in a relationship, they have kids, they are married. Almost everyone has at least experienced love once before in their lives. I feel like such a loser. It's so embarrassing to even think about. I've never even kissed anyone, and let alone anything further than that. It hurts when you realize you've been missing out on these things in your life. Things that everyone experiences. I want something real. I just want that feeling of being happy with someone, but also knowing that I make someone else happy. What is pulling me back so much? I feel like I just sabotage myself anytime I get any hopeful opportunity. See, good. Our community is evolving, chat. Like, they're starting to be reflective. So this is what I want to say. Like, I just want to pause for a second. This first half, we've heard a lot. Right? We hear this a lot. It's awesome that this person gives us the second paragraph. We haven't even read it yet. But, like, do you guys see how this person is setting up the question? And then they're already exploring a hypothesis. So this is awesome. I actually feel really hopeful for Amelia at this point. I know it sounds weird. But just the fact that, like, you're starting to... It's okay to have problems in life. It's okay to ask questions in life. And then taking that next step to start to figure out, like, let me at least think about this. Like, what have I observed? What have I noticed? That's ultimately the strategy that I think leads to success. So let's see what they have to say. I feel like I just sabotage myself anytime I get any hopeful opportunity. I've been asked out on dates, but I've never actually been or gone to one. Okay. I get so scared and anxious that something will happen to me, and I end up making an excuse or canceling. I feel guilty if I even think about accepting the date. I feel guilty that I would be wasting this person's time if I did accept and ended up not seeing them again. I'm extremely scared of even the thought of getting into a relationship with someone or even trying to. I feel like since I've gone this long without finding someone, if I did get into a relationship with someone, then it would have to be perfect, but I never even give it a chance or even try. I have this impending doom that I will be taken advantage of and be used. I just don't understand what makes me do this or feel this way. I yearn for a real relationship so much and wonder how it feels to experience, but my head automatically tells me otherwise, that it will never happen, and if it did happen, that it would go wrong. I tell myself that I'm happy being alone and single, but deep down I know I'm not. I just need help and guidance on how to love and trust again. Damn, this is a good question, chat. So this is interesting, right? So let's look at the language first. So I want you guys to notice the extremities of this person's thinking. So never had a boyfriend. Probably never. Constant. Never. Never. Everyone. Almost everyone. Never. Sabotage myself anytime. I've never. Okay. Have to be perfect. Never even give it a chance. Impending doom sort of qualifies, I think. Automatically. Never. So this is interesting, right? Because they say, I just need help and guidance on how to love and trust again. Now, I could be making a mountain out of a molehill here, right? So when I see all these nevers, I would imagine that the last sentence should say, I just need help and guidance on learning how to love and trust. Right? So that's what you would expect. Like if someone has never done anything before, then you would expect them that they don't, it's not that they lost something, it's that they never had it. But what I'm hearing here is that I just need help and guidance on how to love and trust again. And this sort of makes sense with me because I have a running hypothesis here that something happened to this person, right? So all these thoughts and feelings that they have that, they clearly want this, and yet something in their mind is telling them that they get really scared or anxious. They feel like they're not going to live up to the other person's time. They feel like if they did accept, they have to be perfect. They have to commit, that the first date is the person that they have to spend the rest of their life with. So then the question becomes where do these thoughts and beliefs and feelings come from? And my guess would be that there's something that happened potentially traumatic to this person early on where they got taught in some way, shape, or form that they're different, that they aren't worth it, that they're not good enough, that they have to be perfect. And the interesting thing here is needing to be perfect is about not being yourself, right? Why does someone need to be perfect? If you guys feel like you need to be perfect, if you really tunnel down into that, what you see is that needing to be perfect can only be true if what you are is not worth much. Right? So what this really comes down to is, where did this person learn that they're not worth much? Where did this person lose their self-esteem and lose their confidence in themselves so that they can't afford to be themselves, right? Do you guys get that? That what this person is saying is that I can't afford to be me. I can't be myself. It has to be this way that I see everywhere around me. People are in all these perfect relationships, and I'm not, because there's something fundamentally wrong with me. And we can kind of see it here because, they've never suffered from this problem. So first of all, I don't think that's true. Is there something wrong with me? Like, that's what this person feels, right? This is a question that is born out of an emotion. Is there something I didn't learn or miss out on? Why am I so out of the loop? So like, that's the question you've got to answer, right? So the way I'd approach this, if you guys feel stuck with something like this in life, and this is what we do with people, by the way. So I think like this actually is a great person for group coaching. This is a great group coaching candidate. So concretely, what I'd say, Amelia, is that you should think about signing up for group coaching. And here's why. So like the problem is that this person thinks that they're alone, right? Like that I'm the only one who's ever experienced this. Like this is only me. And so what happens is they show up and they say like, since this is a problem that no one else suffers from, I want to do personal coaching. And I think one of the personal coaching is great, don't get me wrong. But I think one of the most valuable lessons this person can learn is when they show up in a group and they say this, everyone else is like, oh shit, this is exactly like me. And then you have 10 people who all feel this way, that there's something fundamentally busted with them, that the rest of the world is normal, and that like I'm messed up in some way, or I like missed that day of class where you learn how to have a relationship. And then there's a value to that. Like, sure, you can work with a personal coach about the origin of your feelings and stuff, but there's a value to realizing like, oh shit, this is actually like, there are other people who work through this. And then something really cool starts to happen, because then you guys can work on it together, right? And then you guys can kind of explore with each other. And Amelia hasn't figured this picture out, but she's figured out pieces. Do you guys get this? Like, here's the questions. Here's a hypothesis. And then when you get 8 people who form 8 hypotheses and you guys kind of work them together, then you get like an answer floats to the surface. And so my first thought, Amelia, is like, you should sign up for group coaching and bring this to your group and see what they have to say about it. Second thing is, I'll tell you like what I would do if I was running this group, is I'd ask you like, when did you start? Like, did you always feel like you were different? Did you always feel like you were out of the loop? Or did your feeling of being out of the loop start at a particular point? And the really tricky thing here is that when I ask when did it start, a lot of people assume that it has to be like a large traumatic event. Like they just assume that like, oh no, nothing like super traumatic. No, that's not how it works. It's usually a very, very small and seemingly insignificant thing. But when you're young, when you're like 5 or 6, and like something happens to you, like you start this, like the seed is planted in your mind that you're different. And then what happens is that seed gets watered by like small experience after small experience after small experience. And then it even gets further watered when you look around and as a cognitive bias starts to form in your mind, and then you look around and you start making these statements like they have never suffered from this problem. That's not true, right? Like it's just not true, but that's what your mind tells you. And then what happens is you start to have a lens through which you look at the world. And the more that you look at the world through this lens, the more it reinforces your core belief about yourself. And then you're giving it a lot of water. And then it's growing and it's growing and it's growing and it's big. And it feels huge. It feels like this insurmountable problem. And then so what you have to do is you really have to go back and try to figure out like, where did you start to feel this way about yourself? Right? When did you start to learn that you are different? And that other people, learned something that you didn't learn, that you're broken in some way, that some part of your brain just isn't working. And so I think the more that you kind of explore that, you'll begin to realize that like that feeling is like a holdover or an echo from a past experience. It's not necessarily true today. But what's happening is like each of these experiences forms a little bit of an echo in your mind. And then after 1,000 of these experiences, you've got this cacophony that feels really overwhelming in your mind and dominates your thinking. But the funny thing is that all of the energy for those echoes, if you stop feeding it, it'll actually all die out. Right? In order to have that sustained echo, you have to create new sounds. And so this is where you've got to kind of explore where that comes from. And the second thing is that, I would really consider exploring your feelings when you do get asked out. Because like, this is important. I get so scared and anxious that something will happen to me. And I end up making an excuse, canceling. So when we approach problems, like my approach to problems, healthy gamer approach to problems, one is to find the root and one is to work in the present. So recognize that like, you can ignore the root of this if you can learn a little bit more about how to not let your feelings control your behaviors. And so it doesn't matter what you think or you believe or you feel. The basic problem here, it sort of doesn't matter whether you feel like you're overweight so you're anorexic and you don't eat food, or you feel like you're overweight and so you refuse to socialize with other people. I had anxious thoughts about my growth today, and I was like, should I shave? And I was like, whatever. Right? So we all have thoughts and feelings that prompt us to things. I thought about canceling stream because I can't shave right now. I was afraid of how I would look. And so you can have these feelings that can cause you to want certain behaviors. And then understanding in that moment, how do you, like, what is this feeling that, like, is so strong that you want to make up an excuse or cancel? And then in my experience, what happens is as you tunnel down into your emotion in the present, the more carefully you look at it, the more you realize that it's not based on a solid foundation. That it's sort of like this feeling in and of itself. It's like a self-contained entity, and it's not really based on like something real. Which I know feels really strange because the feeling itself is real, but the more that you look into it, the more that you tunnel down into it, the more you're going to realize that the emotion is like an entity of its own that's pushing you to do something, but it's actually not like reality. It's just your emotion. Right? That's what happens when like, emotions make you feel like things are real even though they're not. And a good example of this for people who are severely depressed, they have this feeling that they're worthless and that they're like children would be better off if they weren't alive, which is a crazy thought and is absolutely untrue. But in that moment, that person feels like that thought is absolutely true. And you have to dig into that thought. You have to dig into that feeling until you begin to realize, actually, hold on a second. Of course my kids love me. Of course they would be better off if I was here. But you're not going to realize that until you dig into that feeling in the moment. And so I'd say is try to find the root. And the second thing is, try to figure out like what's going on in these moments where you pull back. And as best as you can, try to let yourself not pull back and choose the kind of path that feels painful to you in that moment, right? Like even if because there are a lot of thoughts and feelings here, which I think are really like cognitive distortions. Like if I did get into a relationship with someone, then it would have to be perfect. No, it doesn't. There's no such thing. Like, and some of this stuff some of these fears are born of lack of experience. It's sort of like, if you've never been in a swimming pool, you may be afraid that you're going to drown the second your foot goes into the water. And it's sort of a reasonable thought, even though it's like not true, but like you just haven't done it yet, so you're not really sure. And so acknowledge for a moment that like you actually are inexperienced, so a lot of your conclusions are likely to be wrong. And just kind of work through that stuff. But I think there's really two angles here. One is to, really try to figure out where you got these thoughts or feelings. And the second is, fine, they're here now. How can you start to work on not letting them control you? And very practically, I'd say that meditation is a very good tool to start to explore yourself. I think if you want to see a therapist, I'd highly recommend cognitive behavioral therapy. In this case, like try that out if you haven't tried it already, because cognitive behavioral therapy helps you understand the relationship between your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors. Third thing that you can do is sign up for group coaching, because I think you'll be surprised to learn that you're not that alone. And that other people will help you work through this. And I think the other really important thing that I like a lot about group is that there's a lot of value, which I think we underestimate, to being able to help someone else. And so, what Amelia really needs more than anything else is to have someone else in group who feels similarly to what she does. And Amelia needs to help this person, right? Help this person find confidence. And that in and of itself is going to give her the most confidence. Okay, 2 other thoughts. One is, but my head automatically tells me otherwise. So this is important. Because what I want Amelia to understand is that this is not actually you, right? So do you guys see how sometimes she uses the first person, and sometimes she uses the third person to talk about her head? And that's what I mean, that this emotion is like a separate thing. It's not actually the real you. It's like some samskar. It's a samskar, or like some automatic programming, some malware in your cognition that tells you otherwise. It's just like some fucking malware that's like sending you pop-ups. It's not actually you. And so that understanding, and the more that you begin to realize that, the more freedom you're going to gain from it. Okay? The second thing is, I want you guys to notice how future-focused Amelia is. Like, she's paralyzed in the present because so much of the future is determined by the now. If she goes out with someone, it would be a waste of time if she ended up not seeing them again. If she goes out with someone, she has to be perfect for the rest of her life. It's like the weight of a perfect future is being weighed in her mind against the present. And so how is she expected to act? Right? So I want you guys to be really careful when you do this. This is a really important point. Don't weigh the future against the present. Don't do it. Because when you weigh the entirety of a future against the present moment, the future is always going to win. So like we had a question or something, someone was talking about, being 27 and wanting to finish college. And they were like thinking about like how embarrassing it would, like in the moment when they're trying to think about, okay, should I re-enroll in college? I'm 27 years old. And in that moment, what they're doing is they're weighing all of the future of that, right? Like if I go to college, I'm going to be older than everyone. I may be the same age as like my teaching assistants. And they're like all of these future things that they're thinking about. I'm going to be like a 29-year-old college graduate. It's going to be so embarrassing. And they pile on all of these future possibilities. Pile and pile and pile and pile. And then like that gets weighed against the present, which is like, do I just ignore my problems for a moment, for one more day, and do I just queue up for whatever I'm playing? So anytime you weigh the future against the present, the weight of all of the future against the present, you're going to lose. You won't, it's absolutely paralyzing. And so start by acknowledging that like what you're doing today is just going on a date. That's all it is. Is there going to be another date? Who knows? Do you have to be perfect? Who knows? All you're doing is you're meeting with someone. That's all you're doing, because that's literally all you're doing. And to really let go of the expectation of everything in your mind about what needs to happen in the future or what is going to happen in the future, because you have no idea. You can't predict the future. Are you psychic, Amelia? But that's what your mind tells you. Your mind tells you, oh my goodness, I know exactly what's going to happen. If you say yes to this person, they're going to take advantage of you. And you won't like them. And you'll be stuck in a relationship, right? So there's another samskar here. You guys are paying attention about her being stuck. She's afraid of being stuck. You guys see that? Why can't she get into a relationship? Because she's afraid of being trapped. It may not be like low self-esteem. So one option is low self-esteem. The other route here is that she may have gotten stuck with something, with someone, a relationship that she didn't want. Ooh. Oh man. I'm so glad we found this one. I read this post on the subreddit, and I was tempted to respond to it there. I love this. This is a great post. And I think this is the kind of thing that we should really think about, having someone on stream to sort of talk about this sort of thing. Struggling between OnlyFans or love dating. I was lurker here for months. Awesome. Thanks for posting OnlyFans or GF. I'm seeking someone who can try to understand me. Cool. Welcome to our community, my dude. I've noticed very kind and compassionate replies here, so I figured I should post my story here. Hopefully you got kind and compassionate replies and didn't get a bunch of trolls, but I've been having a thing with OnlyFans girls for the last 3 years. It started after I was dumped by my girlfriend when I was 21. It felt like it filled a hole in me. That's what OnlyFans does. Even though I'm aware the love is fake, it feels real. That's also a very good analysis. I can choose who will love me. I can choose to pause or leave my OnlyFans girl. It's so much freedom, and it felt real enough, but it has cost me over $10K, which is almost all I had in my bank after working a lot at my father's company during my childhood. I started dating a girl recently, and even though it's great, it feels icky. I want to switch her off sometimes. I want to be able to choose or date other women sometimes. I feel like I'd rather have the shallowness of OnlyFans than to feel like I'm in a cage with one woman for the rest of my life. I don't want to enter a relationship with her and at the same time have my OnlyFans thing going on. That wouldn't be fair for the girl IRL. But I just don't want to give up OnlyFans. I'm working a lot during college to be able to pay for it, and it's worth it. It feels shameful since no one seems to understand me. Okay. This is a fantastic post, okay? So, here's what I like about this post. So first of all, this is a real issue. I was about to say problem, but I'm going to say issue that a lot of people struggle with. Right? So like if we think about why is OnlyFans so popular, right? It's because it makes people feel a certain way, which they control. It's a faucet of love. And all you have to do is pay for it, which is fine because that's what we do for things that we like, right? It's a faucet of love. So I really commend this person for coming out of the woodwork because I think that this is a far bigger problem than people realize, precisely because it is so shaming, right? So like if you try to talk to someone in real life about this problem, boy, are you going to get a ton of judgment. All you're going to get, like, no one's going to help you. They're just going to judge you. And what I really like about this, so first of all, incredibly courageous to post this. I think it's going to make the world a better place by posting this because this is a problem that a lot of people struggle with. Next thing that I really commend about this post is that there's actually a lot of really awesome insight in here, right? Like, even though I'm aware the love is fake, it feels real. You know what you like about this. I get to choose who will love me. It's a lot of freedom, and it felt real enough. And then, like, even this person's dating again. And then, like, you recognize, like, oh, like, your brain is sort of, like, comparing the real girl to the OnlyFans girl. And what it's saying is, like, we're getting some of the same stuff here, but I much prefer the situation where I get to turn it off when I want to. I want to be able to choose or date other women sometimes. Yes, or that's another thing about OnlyFans, right? It's not exclusive. You get to have multiple faucets. And then this is, I think, the really strong sentence. I feel like I'd rather have the shallowness of OnlyFans than to feel like I'm in a cage with one woman for the rest of my life, right? It's really hard to be really non-judgmental about your feelings here. And that's what I think this is really great about this post. Is the person is like admitting, he's like, I know this sounds really bizarre, and I know it sounds kind of like, you know, shameful, but I actually like the shallowness. I don't want to give it up. It actually means something to me. It's not like because usually what we see is like a lot of self-judgment and blame and like, I can't stop. I really want to stop. You know, like, like people are very judgmental towards themselves. Whereas this person says, this does something for me and I actually really like it. And I'm going to admit to myself that I really like it. I just don't want to give it up. It's worth it, right? And this is what's really important to understand about like addictive and destructive behaviors is that like the reason we keep doing them is because the payoff is huge, right? When we think about an addiction, we think about it as a negative thing. But the one thing that has, I think, the one lesson that has made me an effective addiction clinician an effective addiction psychiatrist, is the acknowledgement that the addiction isn't a bad thing, it's a good thing. It's a solution, it's not a problem. Right? Like the reason that an addiction is so hard to kick is because it takes your problems away. It's an escape. It's like imagine how OP it is. It's like God mode. It's like I have all these negative emotions and feelings and I feel like I'm a waste of space in the universe and I can drink this alcohol or I can play this video game and boom, God mode, all those feelings go away. And so like this, it's hard to admit that the OnlyFans means a lot to you. But I think that's the first step, right? The first thing you have to do is like acknowledge your enemy. It's like back in the day when people used to like bow before dueling. Like this is what you guys need to do. If you guys are facing the problem, the first thing you need to do is respect it. Bow. Because you're about to rumble. And it's like, it's going to be a tough fight, but respect it. Respect what the OnlyFans does for you. The next thing is that this person is also falling into the trap. So I don't know if you guys caught this, but we've already talked about this. So, what's the principle here, chat? I feel like I'd rather have the shallowness of OnlyFans than to feel like I'm in a cage with one woman for the rest of my life. What is this guy doing here? Absolutely. So, no wonder, right? All of the future. It's like if I give up OnlyFans, I'm saddled with one person for 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years. When if you really stop and ask this person, you know, how do you want a relationship, like a loving relationship for 40, 50, 60 years? They may say yes to that question. We don't know. And so I think also this person's like a decent dude because he realized, I'm assuming that he's a man, but you know, that he's trying to be fair to the girl in real life. And yeah, I mean, I think it's tough. So I think there are a couple of principles here. So the first is like, you know, once again, don't compare the entirety of the future to your present circumstance, because that's a battle you're never going to win. The future's always going to win. You don't have to date one person for the rest of your life. So the other thing is, like, I don't know if this person is dating exclusively, like this other person exclusively, like whoever their IRL girl is. But, like, it's possible, like, you know, a lot of people will date a couple of women at the same time to figure out, or a couple women will date a couple of men, whatever. Or men will date a couple of men, right? It's not like there's still this idea of, like, going steady or being exclusive, which nowadays is, you know, people understand that sometimes you're going on dates with multiple people. So that's acceptable. You know? And then, I mean, I think this person is pretty far along the way, right? I think that, like, this is definitely something where they understand what OnlyFans does for them. Like, they get it. It means a lot to them. And I'm not going to disagree. And so, oddly enough, I feel like this is the kind of thing where this person has demonstrated so much insight that I think, like, the next phase is actually questions. I don't really have a whole lot of advice. You know, I'm not going to say, I mean, I think you should quit OnlyFans because I think it's like, what happens with OnlyFans is that they figured out how to, you know, activate some parts of your brain without the rest of it. So they figured out how to make you feel like you have a relationship without it actually being a relationship. Right? So they scratch that positive itch without some of the other stuff. So my concern for this person is that, you know, at the end of the day, like, if you hurt your back, I don't think the OnlyFans girls are going to come and, like, take care of you. And when I think about a relationship, I don't think about the positives. I think about the negatives. Like, the real advantage of a relationship is, like, when your chips are down. I'm thinking about sort of a committed monogamous relationship, that is. Right? When you're sick, like, who's going to take care of you? And the other thing is that, you know, I know that OnlyFans is, you know, it's like video and stuff, right? Like in pictures. But, like, I don't know if people actually, you know, not to be indelicate, but I don't know if people get laid through OnlyFans or not. But, like, I think actual physical connection with another human being in a sexual way is, like, an important part of life. And going back to the oxytocin, so not just sexual connection, but like, being held and hugged and cared for, like all of those things are important too. And so I think what you're doing is you're investing a lot into these online relationships that do absolutely fill a hole. And they do a good job of doing it, which is why it's so successful. But they're not going to fill the other holes. And the real problem here is that when you fill one hole so completely, it's easy to forget about the other holes. And then if we really think about getting free of this, the real question is like, you're not going to be free from this curse until you process the hole that was left by the first girlfriend when she broke up with you. So if you really want to be free from this, that's what you have to fix, right? Because if she left a hole in your heart, you've got to patch up that hole. Otherwise, OnlyFans girls are going to keep filling it. Once that hole is no longer there, your chances of being free from OnlyFans are a lot better. So I think the real question that you need to ask yourself, because he's done a lot of introspection and understanding about his feelings in the now. The real question is like, how did she make you feel when she dumped you? And how do you overcome that? Because when you get free of that, then I think the OnlyFans will be easier to shed.